This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, Browns played their last game of the season today. They can't make the playoffs. This is it for them in the 2024 season, and it's coming to a merciful. And I mean, we're at the point to where the Browns have been legit so bad that even the most sane fans are kind of hoping the Browns lose today because they could get a top 3 pick or number 1 overall pick if the Browns lose. But we'll talk about the draft, obviously a ton between now and the draft, and free agency also factors into that. But we got to talk about some guys who are coaching or playing today, or maybe they're just a part of the Browns organization today, who I do not feel like will be a part of the Browns organization anymore after this game, and why that is the case. First name up is Andy Dickerson. Now, I have given Andy Dickerson more slack than most because I recognize that a lot of the issues with the Browns offensive line also existed under Bill Callahan, and I think by virtue of Andy Dickerson not being Bill Callahan, people automatically assumed that he was doing a bad job when the offensive line continued the same downward path that they had been on, even with Bill Callahan. But the reason I think Andy Dickerson is likely to be gone is like all of these developments, and I talked about this in my video with Brad Ward, but there seems to be a lot of developments coming out that tell me that Andy Dickerson ain't coaching the offensive line, or at least it doesn't feel like he's coaching the offensive line. Like he's the least visible person we've seen with them. First thing that dropped was that Mike Vrabel was the de facto offensive line coach, right? When the Browns let him out of his contract to go pursue other opportunities. That dropped. That little news blurb dropped. Okay, cool. So Mike Vrabel's doing that. So what's Andy Dickerson doing? And then I hear from this article that Jeremy Fowler and Daniel Foyce dropped that Kevin has been in the offensive line room helping out. So there's Mike Vrabel, there's Kevin. When I watched Hard Knocks, it was Roy Eviston who was on camera talking to the offensive line. And I'm like, see, now that's 3 people I've seen have something to do with this offensive line room, and not a single one of those people are Andy Dickerson. Now, it could just be that Andy Dickerson got moved to being a co-offensive coordinator, and he was really helping Ken Dorsey figure out the run game. That most certainly could be what happened. And if that's the case, then there might be a chance that he doesn't lose his job after this season. But it can also be the case that something happened with him and basically he got moved away from having to coach the offensive line because they felt like that was what was best for the team. And again, talking about Mike Vrabel, Kevin Stefanski, Roy Eviston, who comes from Philadelphia, all those guys being involved in this offensive line room. Not a ton of Andy Dickerson. I don't know what happened with him. I don't want to say that he's done a bad job because I don't know if he's done a bad job. All I can tell is that this don't feel right. Like everybody being involved in helping out your position room without you being there, it feels odd. Might be a reason for it, and he might keep his job. But I certainly would not be surprised if this game ended, and similar to last year, we find out that a bevy of position coaches got fired, and he's one of those guys. Because the head coach being in an offensive line room, that's not usual for the Kevin Stefanski era. And Kevin usually helps out in the quarterback room, but offensive line room, that's not usually where his attention goes, right? But the fact that there were so many resources pointed at this offensive line room does say something. So Andy Dickerson, not 100% sure he's going to make it. And And the more I think about it, the more I like hear about who's involved here, I just get more concerned here. Unfortunately for Ken Dorsey, I think he's going to be gone. The reason I think Ken Dorsey's going to be gone is he just feels like the odd man out. It's possible that somebody like Clint Kubiak could become available. If Clint Kubiak becomes available, I imagine that is a direction the Browns want to go through. In that same article I mentioned with Jeremy Fowler and Daniel Foyce, they mentioned that the Browns were looking at guys like Kirk Cousins, like Kyle Trask, like Jacoby Brissett. None of those guys scream to me would be successful in a Ken Dorsey-led offense. It just seems like everything that's come out over the last few weeks is pushing the Browns towards going back to that old thing. Maybe making some modern adjustments, but going back to that old thing. And I get why they would want to do that. They had success running more of a true West Coast offense. And maybe the issue that the Browns are finding is that there's just not enough overlap in that Venn diagram between what Ken Dorsey likes to do and what Kevin likes to do to create a cohesive offense. I think the things that Ken wants to bring to this offense individually on their own are good. I think the things that Kevin wants to do naturally on their own are good. But when you smash them together, it seems to create this awkward marriage where it feels like the team is running two different offenses. And that seems to have put a burden on the offense that is making them worse than what they already are. In this offense, especially without a quarterback, was not operating at a high level to begin with. And now they're being burdened with like the slush of having these two systems kind of be Frankenstein together. And look, I think there are some things that work. The motion stuff, the pre-snap motion stuff, that works really well. How they use Jerry Jeudy, that works really well. But there's a lot there that I think they need to fix there. I mean, Kevin's always been really good at splitting the field in half and making your reads pretty easy. That's something that Ken Dorsey is also good at. I think they made each other better on that front, at least for like Jameis Winston when he was out there. But there was something that wasn't working with that approach with Kevin and Ken and Deshaun, and then obviously at the end of the season with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So it just feels like there's no way around it. Ken Dorsey gonna be the odd man out. Like, I think they want to get back to something with a little bit more overlap with what Kevin does. And that's just not Ken Dorsey. Also, unfortunately for Ken Dorsey, he got the stench on him. And like, I don't think it's fair that he has the stench on him, but he has the stench. He's the guy that was brought in as the Watson guru. Watson looked horrible this year. He's the guy that everybody says is the reason why Josh Allen looks like how he does today. And like, that's not 100% fair. Josh Allen had his best season under Ken Dorsey, right, in 2020, but he's got that stench on him. The James Cook thing, that's a stench for him, right? James Cook was looked at as a bad running back. Ken Dorsey gets there, well, leaves, all of a sudden James Cook a top running back. He got the stench on him. And he's going to get fired more than likely. And that's going to be even worse to look for him. He's probably going to have to go back to being a quarterback coach. But, yeah, it's unfortunate for Ken. He has taken a lot of bad raps over the year. And this feels like another one. He just has horrible luck. All right, let's talk about Deuce Staley. I think he's probably going to be gone here, too. A lot of talk about the Browns, like how Browns running game. I don't love how these running backs were coached throughout the year. Like, I've just had issues with the development of this running back room and how these running backs were moving throughout the season. I think if they're going to fire guys who are related to how the offensive line and the run game look, there's no way you can avoid that Deuce Staley's probably got to go too, right? So if you're going to fire Dickerson, Ken Dorsey, basically on the strength of, hey, the offensive line, the run game wasn't good enough, you got to get rid of Deuce too. All right. There's one Brown that's going to be playing this last game, or more than likely playing this last game, Joe Bitonio. Now, this is a completely different tone than the rest of this. Joel is retiring more than likely. And Joe deserves to go out with as much respect as possible. one of my favorite Browns of all time. The last guy standing from the Joe Thomas era, the last guy on this team who played a down with Johnny Manziel. Joe Thomas deserves all the respect you can give him. Jed Wills, that's another guy who's likely going to be gone. Don't see him coming back for obvious reasons. Now, he's not going to play today, but he's gone. I look at the wide receiver room. Maybe Elijah Moore could be on his last game as a Cleveland Brown, but there's a chance that he could be just like super cheap, and the Browns decide to just bring him back if he's going to be super cheap, because he can fulfill that like third wide receiver role pretty well. And also, I think the Browns have to consider how they feel about Cedric Tillman coming back from that concussion. Like, is that going to be a long-term problem for him? If it is, then you might want to add an extra body to that wide receiver room. On the defensive side of the ball, well, let's go back to the offense, because running back wise, Pierre Strong's not playing anymore for the Cleveland Browns. I don't think we're going to see much from Deontay Foreman after this year. Maybe Jerome Ford comes back because it's cost effective to have him back. But I could see them drafting 2 running backs and deciding to move on from Jerome Ford as well, because it just hasn't worked out the way that they wanted it to with him. The problem with Jerome Ford is he's a home run hitter and a third down back, and his pass protection this year has fallen off a cliff for whatever reason. He was pretty decent at it last year, but this year he's just terrible. So if he can't pass protect, then he's not going to be very useful for your team going forward, at least for the Browns. I can see him becoming useful in like a 4 running back system like Miami or something like that, where he can just take a couple of carries, get a couple big home run plays, and they'll be happy with him there. Juan Thornhill and Dalvin Tomlinson could be on their last games as Cleveland Browns. I don't think it's guaranteed, especially in Juan Thornhill's case, because the Browns do have a use for him at free safety. The question is going to be who pops up in the draft, who pops up in free agency. I think if the Browns get some good deals there, then they'll move on from either of those two. Dalvin Tomlinson's probably gone, more than likely, if it makes sense cap-wise to get rid of him. But those are the guys that I think are going to be playing their last games. If I forgot somebody, please inform me. Who do you think has played their last game as a Cleveland Brown today? Let me know in the comment section. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.